So, hello guys. I would like to thank you for being present for this new space. As promised yesterday, I told you that we would discuss a bit further what seems to be the logic behind the hope or the provision that Ukrainians are having for the rest of the year and for the next year. But first of all, I would like to start with something that I actually started to say yesterday, and that something is the fact that the Ukrainian military apparently was a bunch of drug abusers, or I don't know exactly what happened there, but probably they need to be fired, and whoever is in the lower echelon, after passing a couple of mental tests and substance tests, then they may be allowed to start replanning. I'm saying this because of the most recent piece that Valery Zaluzhny, the ex-commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian army, penned for an intervention at a Rusi event, and all over just an absolute nightmare. Like, it's pompous, it's pseudo-intellectual, it's crude, it contradicts itself within the same terms, and it gives this vision on why the Ukrainians are in the absolute shit show they are right now, but also why they are fighting so hard and are willing sometimes to get absolute L's just to prove a certain point. The whole discourse is absolutely shit. Like, I've never seen such garbage. But the most important part is actually the conclusion. The conclusion of this bullshit is, and I shit you not, actually that's what makes all this absolutely amazing. He is saying that rules of the previous conflict will not determine the rules of nowadays conflict and future conflict. The person who says this, the person who believes this, has no place in a military unit. Absolutely not. And I'm going to tell you why. It's true that a lot of things are going to change. A lot of things have already changed within the 2 years that we are now. But the principles governing combat, the principles governing the operational art, the tactical deployment, and how you succeed in combat on a macro level. I'm not saying every day. I'm not speaking about slicing the pie, dropping TM62s into a building to absolutely blow the bejesus out of it. No, I am speaking about how do you calculate what you need. How do you see your logistics? How well you prepare your defense, your perimeter defense, your safety for your logistics, your safety for your equipment, the level of attrition that your equipment, the level of amortization that your equipment. This is very simple. It's so mind-bogglingly simple that at a certain point, as we have already discussed with Timor Criminal, what you understand is that you are going to lose or win a certain operation by looking at just some details. So when Zaluzhny says that somehow the laws of the past, the warfare norms of the past are gone, this is an absolute mind-boggling statement, and these guys should never ever come close to any kind of military function anymore. And the biggest problem of it is that he keeps going in this discussion that technology is going to determine how you're going to win. This, of course, has a context, it has a view, and his view is absolutely dog shit. It is dog shit because he considers the Ukrainian war to be a total war. I'm gonna not bother to explain to you that if this was a total war, Ukraine would be already erased from the fucking face of the earth. It would be done. And then Russia would point the nukes to the next guy who'd like to play games. It is not a total war. The Russians currently are living with a butter and guns society. Is it going well? Is it going perfect? Probably not as much as any one of us would like to have. But this is what everybody is saying right now, that the Russians do not have a total war problem. If you read the last piece of Yanis Klug, I do not agree with it, but he adds some point. And the point is that when Putin started the war, he had plenty of guns, plenty of butter. And now with his slow change towards a militarized society, he's going to have a little more butter, and he needs that butter to get the guns. The other comparison in this fight, the Ukrainians, they don't have guns, they don't have butter, and the only thing that makes them survive is whatever is handed down from the biggest military grouping in the planet. That would be NATO, of course. So, this logic of trying to compare a total war between, at the same time, what he calls a war of choice for the Russians, it makes no sense. And of course it makes no sense. It's fucking Zaluzhny. It's the guy who, after 2 months of getting slaughtered in Zaporozhye, said, oh, maybe I should try something else. And once again, this is the biggest problem I was saying. If you want to understand why Russi cannot fucking say it loud, is because politically it would be extremely damaging for anyone that is not Ukrainian to say that Zaluzhny was a fucking idiot and he literally wasted whatever substance he had there for something that was purely performative. I'm pretty sure that Zaluzhny himself knew that the fucking counter was a fuck up, but he still went for the Hail Mary. And this is the biggest problem Ukrainians have right now. The rest of his discussion is even worse, because the problem that Zaluzhny has, and I'm going to tell you right away, is that he's speaking about mobilizing the whole society to fight the war, because his war, he thinks, is a war of survival. I'm going to repeat, it is not a war of survival for Ukraine. Even the latest fucking proposals by Putin are not about Ukraine disappearing. The risk is, and I'm going to repeat because I said it yesterday, the risk is that indeed, if the Ukrainians do not come to the table, and it turns badly for them into the next upcoming, hopefully soon enough, counteroffensive, then the agreement will be on something way worse. And that's what I said. Instead of losing 4 oblasts plus the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, you're going to lose a fifth. And if you don't agree, and it keeps going like this, then it's going to be a 6th. The whole point of the discussion here is that Russia is making a punitive action. Once again, you could read the last piece of Yanis Kluge. I said again, I don't agree with him, but some points are salient, and he has understood exactly what Putin wants from this war, from the day one to now. And it is literally a punitive action. He wanted a deal, that deal for everybody who now sees the war unfolding was probably the best that the Ukrainians would get. And it was so good that honestly a lot of Russians would have probably hanged Putin by a fucking rebar after what he did. If within a month and something he decided to literally throw to the garbage the DNR, LNR, just to keep somehow Ukraine. While also I'm going to repeat, also having Ukraine completely on the throat of Crimea by still owing the estuary to the Crimean Northern Canal, by still owing Kherson, by still owing every single point that the Russians had occupied within a couple of weeks. Thank God for history, this didn't happen. Because it would have been, honestly, in my opinion, the least understanding decision taken by Putin since he started the war. So, why am I so agitated about Zaluzhny? I am agitated because I really thought that Zaluzhny was, the run-of-the-mill officer with some bullshit idea about this and that. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a end of studies, a qualification essay that most of the military does, especially the American ones at West Point. I really would like you to go and check a couple of them. It's platitudes. It's the most stupid shit ever. There is no depth, and some of the people who are smart and bright and actually have depth in their graduation essays, they don't give you 18 pages or 20 or 40 pages, and it's literally guys who are way too bright for the military, but who are also, in my opinion, destined to something else, and what they see in the military is something that doesn't exist anymore. I'm going to tell you as it is. But I thought that it would be some kind of run-of-the-mill Sovok with all these idiosyncrasies on how to look at war. No, the guy is an absolute dork. Like, everything that he has said in this piece, and I will join the fucking piece from the Ukrainska Pravda, because it's migraine-inducing. That's how bad it is. And if this guy was opposed to Sirsky, my God, the Ukrainians have a huge, I'm going to repeat it once again, when it comes to the intellect itself, the Ukrainians have had a huge upgrade. Maybe Sirsky is too close to Zhelia, and he's a yes man, whatever you want to call it. But right now, let's say it as it is. Thanks to Sirsky, despite the loss of Avdiivka, despite the advancement of the Ukrainian losses in the Pokrovsk area, they are still in the game. And we're very closely going to August, then it's going to be September. Pretty much we are going to the second part of the year. And we're already there, actually, because we're in July. But everything is showing that the Russians are going to do something, but it's not that dramatic if you are an Ukrainian. And if you really have what it takes, like you have the mobilization, you got some more supplies from the West, you can indeed make it a stalemate until something else happens, and that this is the US election, or that it is a stroke that hits Putin, or whatever, it doesn't matter, but you have still some time. I do not think that with Zaluzhny this would have happened. He proved how much of a complete retard he was when he actually killed the counter, not because Sirsky sent 30%. I would like to, in a certain sense, the more I'm listening to fucking Zaluzhny, the more I think that Sirsky, since the beginning, was doing what he had to do. But Zaluzhny was really the fucking dumbass, who had completely absurd ideas, and I think him and Budanov are the cause why Ukraine strategically cannot win. Why they should absolutely call it quits right now, negotiate for some time, get more ammunition, form more troops, and restart the war in a couple of years. If you let both these people still have any kind of control over Ukrainian operations, you are going to have a huge problem, because it's absolutely obvious to me right now that they do not look at what is on the map. They do not look at what is at stake. What they are looking to is at how they can shine personally. And I'm going to tell you, this is what I thought Sirsky was about. Turns out I was wrong. I would like to apologize. And it's on the fucking essay that Zaluzhny read for Rusi. And I think it was a really powerful course that such a stupid bunch of people are to listen to this dork. So basically, everything that is wrong with how a military thinker, I'm not saying an operator. An operator will always go for the most efficient, the most technological approach. An operator will try to have an absolute ascendancy on its target, on its enemy, on its opponent. The problem with Zaluzhny, I'm going to repeat it, the problem with Zaluzhny is that he is trying to avoid the core problem of this war. The core problem of this war is that Ukraine, whatever happens, is not in this paradigm Israel, and I told you yesterday, guys, Israel-Palestine. Actually, it's quite the contrary. Ukraine doesn't have anything. Ukraine is literally Hamas when it comes to how it looks like, what it can offer to the fucking table. And on the other side, when it comes to the technology, the capabilities, if the playing ground was leveled, so if for some reason tomorrow Trump cuts Ukraine off, within 2 months, the whole fucking front from Zaporozhye to fucking Slavyansk is done. If Trump really does what allegedly is being said by Bloomberg, that a lot of the orders that were prioritized for Ukraine under Biden are going to go into national inventory in the US, you are going to see probably the worst fucking shit show of a military debacle. But I do not believe that. I do not believe that because the whole point of Ukraine is to make Russia bleed. It is not that much democracy, how fucking Zaluzhny is talking about, because Ukraine is not a democracy. Ukraine is the same kind of kleptocracy as Russia. Ukraine has the same troubles as Russia. There is nothing that differentiates Russia from Ukraine when it comes to the core argument. The only thing that differentiates that makes the difference between the two is that Russia has more resources, human, natural, technological, and unfortunately for the Ukrainians, historical. And there is no discussion about it. Trying to fucking side with Ukraine just to spite the Russians is fine and everything, but the truth is out there. And in a certain sense, as a Balkanic and as an Albanian, I've always said this. We could have told the same thing about, Turks invading and call them like absolute douches and retards. But going back from the 15th century to the 20th century, they had an empire. Their reach was completely different. What they did with it was something, it's a different question, and honestly, literally they did nothing with it. But the whole point is that you cannot compare us with them. You can be as nationalistic as you want. You can, hold tight to your core heroes and whatever. But at a certain sense, there is a difference between an empire and a nation state. This doesn't mean, once again, that people should deprecate themselves. It's not that. I'm just saying that the reach of an empire like the Ottoman Empire, that the Russian Empire, that the Soviet Union, the US, the Brits, and everything, makes it, that's their strength. And this is how Zaluzhny himself should have known this, because that fucking retard is a Sovok like everyone else that is currently managing the Ukrainian army general headquarters. They should know better, and actually they should know the Russians as much as they know themselves. And the whole principle that Zaluzhny is bullshitting about technology this, technology that, and everybody is trying to incense the Ukrainians on their amazing solutions. And I'm like, what the fuck are you even saying about? Most of the Ukrainian solutions are fucking DUI bullshit that they're forced because they cannot develop other stuff. If the Ukrainians could have the air defenses that the Russians can produce themselves, they wouldn't fucking care about pickups with ZUs and M2s. They wouldn't have these fucking baby phones turned acoustic signals to stop literally fucking RC projects with fuel and explosives that the Russians are raining on their asses. Same thing happens to the Russians, by the way. So the point, once again, is not to misunderstand the situation, and that's what everybody's trying to do, just to fucking hype Ukraine. And this is nuts. And I'm going to tell you guys, it is all the more nuts that if you want to see the real deal, is when the Americans are going to make that mistake to actually have a war. And when the Chinese production machine is going to fucking crank, instead of iPhones, fucking bombs. Then you can hype fucking Ukraine how much you want for one FPV after one soldier, but when the fucking Chinese is going to fucking raise your whole platoon with one fucking cruise missile, and that's what the Russians did at the beginning of the war, then you're gonna have fun. Like, the scale of this war has nothing to do with total war. Maybe it is for the Ukrainians because they are at the brink, and actually, this is one of the things I took out from what Zaluzhny said. For Zaluzhny, this is like live or die. For the Russians, it's simply not. The Russians, for whatever damage the Ukrainians are doing over time to the Russian infrastructure, it's fucking mosquito bites. When the Russians want to turn up the fucking heat, you got whole hospitals that are without electricity. You got rolling fucking blackouts for 18 hours. You're forced to buy shit that the Lithuanians and the Baltics have withdrawn from fucking electrical grid so you can attempt to install it. You attack 17 refineries, of which 9 are already back in function fully. Russians attacked twice Kremenchuk. It's still not fucking fixed. And you're forced to fucking import fuel. And now you're blocking the Hungarians who are giving you at least 30% of the refined fuel. It's absolutely mind-boggling. The whole situation right now with Ukraine, and I think in a certain sense this is why for a lot of people it might be looking as it's a bit humiliating that the Russians are still fucking dealing with this shit. And it's true. But the problem stays the same. If the Ukrainian general staff still harbors these ideas that somehow they had a shot at winning against Russia because the situation turned the way it turned in March 2022, and they also freed part of Kharkov and part of Kherson, I am really fucking sorry for everybody who has to listen to these people. But that's why you need the past to remind you that every time that a smaller nation somehow has won, and there are some outliers, of course, it hasn't lasted long enough for them to celebrate. And the biggest outlier right now is literally Israel. And there are justifications for that, but strategically Israel remains on the same problem, which is exactly why they're fucking going apeshit right now. So when Zaluzhny says the rules of yesterday are not going to govern the victory of tomorrow, you have to understand that you have to do with an absolute retard of a person. A guy who's all yapping and it's about how the soundbite is gonna fucking ring. I honestly go, it's on Ukrainska Pravda, his fucking speech, and it's fucking mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling because he's considering this war to be the stepping stones for every single war later on. But as I said, that's the fucking problem. It's not true. Every intervention that NATO is going to have is carefully chosen so that there is not such a problem when it comes to both the blockade of the targeted entity, nation, terrorist group, fraternity, whatever you fucking want to call it. The enemy that the Americans are going to point out is never going to have the same ecosystem as Ukraine has right now. Because the last time it was like this, and it was the Vietnam War, the Americans lost. And we can add Afghanistan to that, but Afghanistan is a completely different thing. The Americans just being retards and trying to impose a kind of nation building to justify goals that had no fucking point. I mean, we're gonna defeat terrorism by building a democratic nation, and first rule of democracy is free belief. So the problem is that you got in a country where people believe in fucking whipping women, where the common belief is that there is a absolute inferiority of the female to the male. And once again, this is not trying to justify this. I'm just saying that's how you literally come to Afghanistan and how the fucking customs are. And your idea of being democratic, but democratic only if the people are thinking the same bullshit as you, of course, gonna get you fucking killed and not succeed. And that's the funny part. The funny part is that Americans had failed from the get-go. And in a certain sense, the Russians had failed from the get-go their initial war planning with Ukraine. If it's still what we think it is, but apparently it really was that. They wanted to fucking threaten the Ukrainians of whatever, have some kind of chip change with a couple of places left and right, and then Ukraine said, okay, 60,000 army, I'm not joining NATO, not EU, please don't kill me, Putin, and it was fine. This was delusional when we see what the Ukrainians were up to for 10 years. 8 actually, from 2014. But the same thing is on the Ukrainian side. They are thinking that they're going to kick the Russians out based only on FPVs and a couple of ATACMS. While they cannot fucking even produce their own ammo. This mentality that somehow Ukrainians are higher than Russians, Ukrainians belong to Europe and to the West, and the Russians belong to the Asian horde. This is what I already explained since 2022. There is a huge fucking mistake that was done there. And this was not done by Ukrainians. I do not believe that Ukrainians look at the Russians and say, oh, these guys are dumb. Because they literally look at themselves in the mirror. Most of the Ukrainians are probably cursing the Russians for what they're doing. And there is a idea on how the fuck did we get there, But the people who were still instilling this dehumanization of the Russians and this deprecation of them. You remember the jokes, thank God they're stupid. All this stuff, it comes from a very fringe group within the Ukrainian politics and from their fucking outside aides. We're talking about people who still think that you need to be pro-German or something, and that World War II was actually lost, despite the fact that the Ukrainian Socialist Republic won the war as a part of the Soviet Union. This is the mental image that these people have. And if you, once again, you have to read that piece and just think about how fucking shallow everything is. And I mean, I'm not expecting Zaluzhny to make this whole fucking pamphlet because he actually wrote one. It was already garbage a year ago. But you go to Russia and the only thing you can say, oh, everything's, everything's for survival. I mean, no, bitch, you're not surviving anything. What's happening right now is that you don't want to stop the war the same way as the Russians do not stop this war. But you also have a choice. Sit on the table and say, okay, I will give you the fucking Oblast plus the Crimea. And I'm going to say, people are going to say, oh no, it's illegal and shit like that. Who the fuck cares about legality right now? Legality is when literally Italy helps the Israelis bomb another country which has starving one of its ports due to the fact that Israel for over 50 years is treating a bunch of human beings as literally zoo animals on the decision of a bunch of whiteys in the 40s. It doesn't get more post-colonialistic than that, and I'm sorry for everybody who's going to be fucking shocked for what I'm saying, but every time that I see the Palestinian Israeli situation, I'm saying, fuck, thank God it was in the Balkans. Because it was actually. How it was divided, how people wanted to fucking build up the whole region. Thank God. It's happening there, not at us, because we already had our fair share of bullshit. But once again, I'm going to repeat what I'm saying here is that until the Ukrainian leadership is going to blatantly misinterpret, lie, and gaslight itself based on shit that has nothing to do with what this war is about. This war is not about victorious FPV operators from the Ukrainian side slaying Russians every single day. It has also nothing to do with UMPKs raising whole buildings with Ukrainians inside. No, this thing has to do that one side has less infrastructure, less resources, and is not even being aided by its fucking huge mega allies to do anything to stop that onslaught. And at some point, the Russians are going to stop, gather themselves, see where the fuck they are. What have we done for 10 months? Probably a year worth of offensive in October. And the desolation that this Russian advance would have fucking impacted the Ukrainians with is going to be laid bare, because right now the Ukrainians, they don't give a shit. They are literally defending. They are not forced to go out on a limb and storm Russian positions where they are doing it. They are doing it in a very controlled environment with a absolute superiority of means. In Serebrenka, they are, every single time when I attack a trench, there are 20, 30 against a couple of Russians. And it's logical because they have done their job. They do exactly the same thing as the Russians on a micro level. Because that's how it works. You grind down the position, then you go to assault and occupy it. But it's not Serebrenka forest. It's not a couple of houses in Starica. It's a fucking 800-kilometer front when you're going to decide where you're going to attack, how you're going to defend, what is your trump card. Because before it was Atacams, it was HIMARS, it was artillery, whatever. It was Storm Shadow. Now you're going to have the F-16s. How are you going to employ them? Where is your breach going to happen in this Russian front? Because on the most dangerous part of the front, and I'm not speaking of Zaporozhye, I'm speaking about Donbass right now, the Russians have advanced over 25, they're going to be at 30 kilometers. Donetsk, the limits of Donetsk city are almost at 20 kilometers from the first Ukrainian firing position. And the very little thing that is making you very proud, pro-Ukrainians, about slaughtering Russians is going to happen to you. You are going to fucking expose yourself. And then we're going to have an FPV bonanza every fucking single day. I'm going to see MRAPs burning, Max Pros burning, Abrams burning, Bradley's burning. And I'm not even talking about helicopters, planes, ATGMs, Lancets, artillery, Iskanders, when you're going to fucking start preparing yourself to, attack your staging ground. No, I'm just speaking about what's going to happen to you while you're in movement. And we know this because it happened already to Ukrainians last year. And the only thing that we're seeing right now, the Ukrainians just don't have the equipment, the people, and anything else to operate at that level. Probably they're going to be ready next year with again, completely patchwork of equipment, mostly with still Soviet-era tanks from things that will be able to cobble together, a couple more Western tanks, not much more than they had last year. And the only thing that's going to change, as I said, is how they're going to use the F-16. If that becomes a fiasco, as I said, because right now it's supposed to be only a air defense panacea, fine. It's fine. Nothing's going to change eventually when it comes to the core of the problem, which is you need to cut the land bridge. And one of the things that the Russians have done is that they restored the exact kill zone where the Ukrainians died last year. The kill zone is back on. If they now push on the Verminsky salient and go beyond the positions they held last year, which I hope doesn't happen, because then it would, I think it would literally spook the Ukrainians. And instead of actually committing to a counteroffensive, they're going to just start this delaying action and keep just going on defense, and then trying to have a kind of negotiation for which they are going to promise and say yes to a lot of shit, but they're not going to hold them because that's how Ukrainians are. But all this was just to say to you, like, whatever Rusi had as an idea and whatever they read on these general staff documents, given how its main brain for almost 2 years was operating, you can literally throw everything of that garbage outside and trust only what you see and what happened and what we know more or less. Whatever the Ukrainian general staff says is bullshit. It's just covering their asses because the people who thought this brand of war post-2022 had no idea how to fight it. Except for, give us guns, give us ammunition, we're gonna send people down the fucking barrel. And these people mock the Russians for what they are trying to do in order to reduce the casualties, avoid the fucking obvious FPV issues, try to blend in, disperse their forces. And this, of course, has a cost. The more you disperse, the less efficiency you're going to have on a wide band of the front. You're going to have these small skirmishes every day, which, when it happens and it succeeds, like with Ocheretino, like with Toretsk, with Krasnogoivka more recently, it's going to expand until the situation for you is boiling down to being shit. And I already posted a couple of complaints by Ukrainians themselves. And I'm saying, forget about everything else right now. FPVs, UMPKs, all this stuff, they really do not matter. What matters is the fucking ratio of forces and how this ratio is being applied on the front line. What's the target? And even then, you wouldn't exactly understand what the goal is, because at the end, okay, fine, you're gonna isolate Konstantinovka, clear up Chasov Yar, put Konstantinovka in a kind of semi-encirclement, Syrsky trademark, and then what? You're gonna take Konstantinovka. Is Ukraine gonna yield? Of course not, because the leadership on the Ukrainian military is willing to go to a point where the whole fucking country is gonna pay for their fucking ineptitude. And that's it. There is nothing else. The whole thinking on both sides, Russian and Ukrainian, is that with time, every advantage that the other party has is gonna be ground to zero. This is the whole attrition dilemma that everybody on NATO side is selling to Ukrainians. Oh, you're going to see within 16, 18, 24 months, the Russians going to run out of everything and you're going to roll over them. And I'm like, oh yes, for like now, next year's Russians are not going to do anything and let that just happen. And the same in a certain sense is also true for the Ukrainians. It's true that Ukrainians are being ground to a certain sense, but they are trying their best to avoid that fate. At some point, you're going to be there. But the people behind the war effort in Ukraine have a different vision than the Russian ones. The Russian ones, Putin said it. I want the blast Crimea, and I'm going to grab some things to change for you. You're going to have a small army, no NATO, fine. That's his fucking limit. And he's way closer to attain that limit. If you see the ground occupied, except for the two specks in Kherson over the Dnieper, and the part of Zaporozhye, the Russians can still occupy what they want. If it keeps going like this. For Ukraine, liberating the whole territory will require probably the whole guys that they literally forced to update their status within the military system to go and get killed. With the current technological situation on both sides. And don't forget that this war has been literally a ping pong match. You have had an action and a reaction. Action with Ukrainians mobilizing, getting a lot of shit from the West, having ISR, organizing a attrition phase on different oblasts, and then succeeding in most of those operations, and then suddenly Russians mobilizing partially, investing a shit ton of money into this, stopping the counteroffensive, absolutely smashing whatever was given to the Ukrainians, and then slowly advancing over the and making the whole situation untenable long term. This tit for tat is not going to change. There are no game changers. Because when we reach that quote-unquote game-changing situation, the Russians are going to just escalate a little more. And right now, the Russians have never accepted to escalate qualitatively, which is, in this case, TAC nukes or ecological disasters. And don't get me with the Novakakova Dam. If you want ecological disasters, I already told everybody, you hit Kaniv, you hit Kiev, and you see Ukraine fucking drown. Over 20% of its population absolutely getting trashed. Russia has only just intensified what it wanted to do. Intensification of the electricity campaign, the intensification of the logistical campaign. Russia has never gone how America has done it, which was first the guns, then short-range tactical missiles, then short-range ballistical missiles, jets, and so forth and so on. Although when it comes to jets, the Ukrainians got them pretty soon in the war with the Slovak and Polish equipment that was given to them. Then what if actually we got a strategic game-changing logic by the Russians? And I'm not saying, because in a certain sense, the UNPK campaign is exactly a strategical addition to the Russian military, which is making life absolutely impossible for most of the Ukrainians at the zero line. But what if we go further than that? As I said, what if you actually blow the fucking dams? What if you actually blow the bridges? And we know that they can do it. So what if? And we have this absolutely nonsensical discussion about how clearing Sevastopol of the Russian fleet is a defeat or whatever. I'm saying, you know where you're defeated? You are defeated when all those ships are under the sea and when Ukrainian ships are landing in Crimea. That is not happening anytime soon for the exact same reason that the Russians are pulling out and are curtailing some of the operations. Now, let's go to the exact discussion that I hinted yesterday, which is our friend Conan Muzika from the Russian Consulting Group, guys at Paul, had a small thread, and he made a podcast out of it. Same thing, Kaufman also made a thread about what he wanted to expect. I'm gonna make something else with the Kaufman thread because it seems to me that there is this parallel discussion between all these scholars, be that Roshan, be that Asad Blackberg, be that Rusi. The whole analysis that they're laying out seems that everybody is agreeing to say the same bullshit. But with Conrad, this is something different because he is, as I said yesterday, optimistic to a certain level and thinks that the Ukrainian side has better chances. It's a lot better than what it was 4 months ago. First of all, he thinks that the front's going to stabilize by half of August. I would like to share the same optimism because that would mean that finally the Russians are going to start breathing on this offensive, and they're going to also let the Ukrainians do exactly what they are supposed to do if they want to get the country back, which is dying. Um, but I do not share at all his optimism. It's true he gives a caveat when he says that it would depend on how the Ukrainian mobilization will be employed. And in this case, I touched a little bit of it yesterday. And he says it's better to refill existing units that, quote unquote, are already on front line, rather than blending all the greenhorn guys in the new units and then pulling the experienced units out for refit and re-equipment and send the new units head down to actually fight. That strategy of blending existing troops with fresh troops, I already explained, it would have been great last year when the troops that you had at the forefront were fresh. Most of the units had already been completely reshaped by August, so they had 1 to 5 months worth of fighting time, fighting experience. You had the guys that had survived the Kherson offensive, guys that were riding high after the Kharkov offensive. Then they started to get losses, they got pulled back. Then you got a lot of people that were sent to Bakhmut for the defense of the city. But generally, there was still enough troops to rotate and have this idea that new guys can be blended with old guys. Although, if you guys remember what was said last year, that the average new conscript in Ukraine side, would only survive between 4 and 8 hours at the front of Bakhmut. Well, you get the idea. The point, however, in this case is the following. Having the new guys mingle with guys who, for many of them, have more than 2 years of combat. If you want to refit units like 93rd, units like 128th, like the 10th, and so on, you're gonna have a problem there, because it's true, you're bringing new blood to the unit, but most of these guys have been completely burnt out. So at some point, you're going to have these diminishing returns, which is exactly what happened with a lot of Russian units, which is why the Russians pressed for new units to be built and then sent to combat. And then the whole rotation game started. This also offers something else, and that something else is that if your existing cadre unit is engaged, and after the 2 years and something is of fighting, or for other units like the 47th, which honestly is the L unit on the Ukrainian side, these guys are in now for over a year, and they really never had the time to rest and refit and everything. And it's nice that they got Zex for them to help them out, but they're still on the line, which means that what you're doing is just sustaining the grounding of the unit. You are not helping these guys recover and also pass the experience. Because at the end of the day, you're going to feed these guys with, let's say, 50% of new units, instead of having completely new division that would be a lot more functional. It's true they won't be having that experience, but at some point they will need to start, and just getting as fillers in the existing units with already, overextended mentally, physically, and also militarily units, what you're going to do is that you are going to help burn out the new guys faster based on the type of front they're going to be inserted. Once again, I'm thinking about the 47th here, because the guys lost over 60 fucking Bradleys, then they went back, lost another 40 plus. Now they got Zex. They had this very fucking shitty situation that Zex were uncontrollable. Then Zeks themselves are not proving themselves very brightly by making a lot of mistakes. The way they displaced themselves, a couple of them got caught by the Russians, some other got, of course, killed. So the whole logic here, and I'm going to repeat, the whole logic, in my opinion, would be just put the new guys in, let the old guys rest, refeed them, retrain them, because they're going to be a lot better to exploit the situation than, putting them first, grinding them down. Then you put the new guys who are supposed to, withstand the advancement of your unit, and you're going to end up with new guys against Russians. If it turns for the worse, then you lose everything. You are taking out a very, experienced unit and also taking out a new unit. Instead of putting the new unit and then letting the experienced guys exploit the gaps that the new, freshly, fully equipped unit are done. In a certain sense, that's what the Russians did with the Mobiks between December and March 2023. Same thing that Wagner did with the Zeks, send the Zeks to get shredded, and then literally they followed up after them. Once again, this is very problematic as a view, but this is how I think it should happen, in the sense that if you're going to start this counterattack, your most experienced guy is going to be in front line, yes, but that means you're going to get your best guys FPV'd, arted, and shredded, and the new guys are just going to be clueless after that. And in a certain sense, the fortitude of 47th, also, although it's the L Brigade, was proven when they kept going in Robotino as greenhorns with all the losses and everything. So that's my point of view, because that's how we're going to have to do it anyway. Your counterattack as Ukrainian is not going to be Kharkov 2022, is not going to be Kherson 2022. Right now, with everything that we're seeing, the Ukrainian counteroffensive is going to look a lot like the Russian offensive in October 2023 for a while, at least 3 to 4 weeks, and then maybe some gaps going to open, and we're going to see what happened more like in Bakhmut last year, when the Russians didn't really stood and fought for the most advanced points, and then at some point they just fortified the lines and let the Ukrainians come to fire bags and then start to repel them. But once again, this is the problem that I'm having with Conrad here, is that he's giving advice based on things that he thought would work last year. But we're a year later, we are thousands of dead people later, and we're also on a completely different ecosystem for both sides. And one of the things I want to say is that even if the Russians had half of the FPVs than the Ukrainians have, the FPV by excellence is a harassment and defensive tool. And given how the Russians now have started to attack very deep logistical routes, if you check Draja, you're going to check the few attacks that happened on the Selidovo-Kurakovo highway. The Russian FPV drones are hitting minimum 60 kilometers from the contact line, which means that they're launched from even further. Remember that the biggest problem the Russians had for a while is that they were limited in their transmission range. And this limit made easier for Ukrainians to establish area jamming tools. But now that those drones can fly beyond, they do not stay on the jamming areas, they can break through and hit Ukrainian logistics. And this also is going to have a role to play with experienced brigades against green brigades. The problem
that then Conrad starts is like, he has still a couple of things to say. One of that is that the Ukrainians have an artillery issue. The artillery is not deep enough in the rear in order to hit the Russians. And this, for him, has to do with probe charges. I made the post yesterday, if you saw, with a small diagram between the old DAG probe charges and the new MAX charges, which is the modular augmented charges. The MAX charges are literally some cheese cylinders, and you put from 1 to 5, even 6 in sometimes, and that's the level of the propellant that you're gonna, fire, which is going to land your ammunition round between 3 and 30 kilometers for the quote-unquote dumb rounds fired from a 39 caliber length barrel. So basically 39 times your bore. And multiple times already I've said this. One, the 47th still has bag charges. The previous bag charges were for 7-kilometer range. These were from 10 to 18, which was already something good. But the fact they're using bag charges or, propellant charges, whatever, which is what I was saying, that Conrad has a problem here. And that problem is that he, like everybody else, instead of analyzing what the issue is, he addresses it completely wrong. And why is it wrong? Because of the following thing. The guns that the Ukrainians have for the moment, which are still being fired by the previous charges that still are available, by the way, the Brits use bag charges still. This is not only due to the charges or the disponibility or the availability of the charges themselves. It has to do with the fact that the majority of the rounds that are being used by the Ukrainians, the majority of 155 millimeter rounds that are being used, are short range, very common, basic M107. So when you have this very basic ammunition charge that's going to fire for, let's say, 20, let's give it 20, or with longer barrel guns like Caesar or Bogdana, it's going to hit at 25. It's not going to change much. There is the reason of protecting the barrel as well, because that's another issue, that the fact that Ukrainians do not have enough barrels for that. And the point is that given that the 777 barrel lifespan with the maximum charge, so basically the fifth charge number 5, so the 5 common barrels of propellant, or the long bag, it's 2,000 rounds, 2,200 when you don't care for accuracy at the end. For a Caesar, half-life is 1,120 something rounds fired with any propellant charge, because the French mostly were firing with charge 3 or charge 4, so basically rather longish charges. But when you want to fire at the higher range, if you want to fire an Excalibur and so on, you're going to max your charges, so basically you're going to ground your guns. So this whole argument that Conrad is saying about the probe charges not being enough, it has nothing to do with the fact that the charges alone are a problem. The whole ecosystem is a problem. When your army has hand-me-downs, when your logistical chain is 8 different howitzers, and I'm going to count them with you: Caesar, Bogdana, Dana M2, Susanna, Archer, Crab, AS-90, and the Paladins. And let's not forget the Panzer Haubitze 2000, which is even more. Just think about it. And one of the complaints was on some guns you cannot fire the same charges, and you cannot also fire the same ammunition. So basically, it's true that it's better to fire a Sekai on the Panzerhaubitze 2000 or very specialized rounds, ERBFB for the Caesar, and so on and so forth. The whole principle here, and we're not counting the Soviet caliber legacy equipment, so basically to A65 or Mussa-raseh that they still have remaining, or then the M46 given by Finland, or the D20s, D30s, and so forth. I'm not discussing this, I'm just keeping focus on 155. So we're even beyond what we thought we would be. This is the nightmare of the Ukrainian army right now. The Ukrainian army has a fuck ton of different assets which do not all fire the same round, which would have a differential propellant treatment. But at the same time, the major part of the ammunition that you're getting from everyone, be that the Czechs, be that the Americans, it's the very core basic M107. And the best example of this is one attack from a Lancet hitting the side of a Bogdana. You see the very specific shape of the M107 on the racks ready to be fired. So if you got this short-range ammunition, it doesn't matter how much propellant you're going to put in there. It's not going to fly more than that due to its very own ballistic properties. The only thing you're going to do with it is just spin it off for a few kilometers more, and you're not going to reach the target that you want. And it is that simple. But once again, people like Conrad or others, they keep doing these things by saying half-truths, saying one thing but not the other. And also, the biggest problem is that he's listing a couple of shortcomings, like, as I said, artillery range, lack of short air defense, the fact that the Ukrainian commanding chain has sometimes different priorities, and I'm like, what priorities? No, the thing is that the Ukrainian high command sometimes is pulled by the political requirement, by its PR game. And in this sense, guys like Budanov, I said, are the first that should have been, getting a third eye, because the disruption that they're causing has nothing to do for any kind of success from Budanov. You have mass failures that cost you lives. Those guys that went and bombed some Ilyushin 76 up north in Russia, then they had to get the fuck out of Russia through the southern border. They got ambushed, caught. It was a fucking slaughter. Another bunch of Gur guys got fucked. The problem with this high risk average result is that it's high risk to start with, and on top of it, it's not giving Ukrainians that change. Okay, fine, you damaged or destroyed the A-50U, and then the Russians just pulled 2 out of storage, spent 3 months, and now those 2 are undergoing tests so they can be replaced. Big fucking deal. The problem with this, once again, I'm going to repeat, is that Ukraine cannot do that. Ukraine needs hand-me-downs. Of course, it's got ISR control. But this thing, Conrad is not expressing this. For Conrad, it's not a problem that Ukraine doesn't produce anything. because, the checkbook is going to work for them. And the biggest situation that I have with this is that at some point you start to recognize the UMPK, and the hyperbole is striking. Like last year, 100 UMPKs are raining down us, nothing's hitting, but this year 4 are landing and 4 are hitting. And it's exactly as I told you yesterday. You cannot believe that suddenly, by magic, something happened. The Russians did not become smart in a year, and the Ukrainians didn't get stupid in a year. No, what is happening is that last year, maybe the accuracy was not 100%, but the aggregate value of that bombing meant that this year the situation is so bad, and the small incremental accuracy gain of maybe 15% instead of 50% is now 65%, hits completely differently, because as I said, last year we have proven by Ukrainian sources themselves 15,000 dropping, but this year by the Russians' own show, we have for June a UMPK tagged 2018. So in June 2024, 2018 UMPK kits were built. And those UMPK kits, they have nothing to do with UMPBs, because UMPBs is a full bomb. So you need to add the UMPBs, you need to have the Shahids, you need to have the KH, whatever, you need to have the Elmurs, you need to have the Lancets. The problem here, as you can see, is the scalability of the threat. What happened with the FPVs and Ukrainians is fine. They had to do something because, artillery wasn't there. Any other kind of equipment was extremely expensive. They tried with switchblades. Switchblades were mostly shit. The Warmates are similarly also not that good. The Bulava X-Wing, the knockoff of the Lancet, after a couple of showings, which was, okay, why not? It's gone as well, because it takes time to prepare these batches, and they are discovering the same issue as the Russians, that Lancet is fine and dandy, but you cannot always hit it for many reasons. The fact that the Lancet getting to the spot most of the time, if it's not flying at the same time as the Zala 421, you're going to have a problem to join your target on time. Basically, it boils down to what is he trying to say. In the case of Conrad, I think he's just trying to give more or less credence to his points and basically grift the shit out of this war. And this is a common theme. We already discussed it. Nothing is being said about the manner how the enlistment, enrollment of Ukrainian forces, their equipment. The more you see the level of equipment of even very good troops in the Ukrainian side, you can see that the tip of the spear is going to be extremely well prepared. But most of the troops on the rear, when they got captured, there is a recent video of 3 guys getting captured by the Russians on the Dnieper Islands. The majority of the forces on Ukrainian side is not trained like Rainbows or SSOs. These guys have huge problems with their equipment. They have huge problems with their sustenance. The same way they're trying to portray the Russians drinking peace and stuff like that. One of the things that a lot of people seem to have forgotten when it comes to how Ukraine is dealing with the war is exactly what Zaluzny said, because that guy said some truth. Ukraine is on the brink. I'm not saying they're going to collapse tomorrow, but Ukraine needs every fucking little thing that it can throw there. It's not a joke. I mean, they are fucking fighting for 3 million a year. They are dying for the 1.4 million that European Commission is going to disburse from the so-called Russian proceeds at Euroclear. You can see where the problem is here. So this army, with this limited budget, with this limited equipment, that is maximizing its posture right now, which is on the defense, cannot be expected right away to mount an offense. So when Conrad is saying the front is going to stabilize, but it depends on how the Ukrainian general staff is going to deal with it, and I'm saying, okay, it's fine, it's in 3 weeks. We're going to see if in 3 weeks the front stabilizes, there is no more advances. But in a certain sense, that doesn't seem the case. Because when you look at the map, that's one of the things I wanted to say for a while now. When you look at the map, once Pokrovsk goes down, the next major hub for the Ukrainian forces, if you check the map, it's pretty simple. Once Pokrovsk falls, either you're going to use Dobropila, which is a reasonably sized city, but it's within 15 kilometers of Pokrovsk, and you're going to get that shit bombed. Or you're going to go for Mezhova or Slovyanka, which are a bit further, but they do not represent anything else because you got only one way to go there. Your actual real next step is Pavlograd, but it's already over 80 kilometers from Pokrovsk, if you want to be honest. So the problem that we're having with actually 90 kilometers. The problem that we're having is that Pokrovsk to Donetsk is 47 kilometers. And after that, it's easier to go from Pokrovsk to Kramatorsk than from Pokrovsk to any other part. Especially if Kurakovo falls, as it's being attacked now, the Russians were in Maximilianka. So what's the point on telling people that the front is going to stabilize and that the current enlistment is going to help stabilizing your front? So you're going to burn all the new guys just to stop the Russians from advancing. And once again, look at the post from Officer Plus. I love mocking this guy for the moment. I don't even know why. He said that, okay, every next city on the front line is getting ground to ashes. So UMPKs are raining Konstantinovka, UMPK is going to rain in Pokrovsk. And after that, every single fucking city around it's going to be grounded to a point when it's not going to be useful for us, so basically in this case Ukrainians, to have as a staging point. And I'm like, so how are you going to stop the Russians from bombing you? When your biggest problem right now is that you don't have the AD to cover your cities, your rear, let alone to cover your front line. And the whole discussion about Ukraine needing 25 Patriot batteries, I'm going to repeat what I said. I'm laughing to tears because 25 Patriot batteries, even if we speak about a firing unit of 4 TELs, That's 25-16. That's over 400 interceptors on the ready, and you know already that the Americans haven't gone beyond the 700 interceptors, and it's every interceptor, pack 2, pack 3. So what exactly are we talking about? You're gonna just equip all these firing units once, and then what once you fire your shot? And you're missing, because that's what we heard with the fighter bombers clip. They fired 3 Patriots, every single one of them missed. The plane was fine, he landed home. Okay, he was wounded, but that's the point. Then you scratch 3 interceptors, and on the 400 something, what are you doing? 410 if they are pack 2s. What if out of, I don't know, the 300 cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, Shaheeds and everything, you're gonna fire half of them to intercept the most important targets? Then what? Who is gonna give you more interceptors? The whole problem that we're having right now is that Ukraine has a capacity and has a depth problem. They don't have enough depth against Russian weapons, and they do not have enough storage, resources, reserves to sustain any kind of bullshit that Russians might do. And I'm telling you, if the Russians tomorrow decide to go for a saturation strike, let's say they're gonna fly with about 200 cruise missile worth of package, then what? What do you do? Are you gonna let some through because you don't want to be bingo on air defense, or what? What happened in Kiev recently was just that. What happened in Kiev was just the proof that saturation is going to work twofold, as I said to you before. Either you will not have enough ammo, either you will not choose to intercept because you want to keep that ammo for something that might be more interesting. So I'm going to repeat myself once again. The problem with most of these guys is that they stopped thinking beyond a certain term. For Conrad here, the takeaway is that they have suspended the time frame, not like it used to be before. If you read him like, oh yeah, in the future the Ukrainians are going to prevail. No, right now most of these guys are literally standing into this 3-4 months format until the end of the year. The whole point, for some reason, is that Ukraine needs to survive this summer. And I'm going to address that with Kaufman in another day. Ukraine needs to survive this summer because after the summer is going to be better. I'm like, why is it going to be better? Let's not forget, the Russians attacked in October. October, November, December. They fucking went through the worst part of the year. They attacked and they got Avdiivka. Your problem is not the weather. Your problem is not even the troops that you're gonna fucking train. The problem is what is the decision that the Russian military is gonna take for the fall and the winter. This is the biggest situation for the Ukrainian army. Right now, they do not control the initiative, and they have a problem of second-guessing the Russians. And this is due to the fact that despite the advancement being very slow, the Russians have expanded in multiple areas, which are all targeting the overtaking of the Donbas region, so basically the Lugansk and Donetsk Oblast, and they are going slowly but surely towards that goal. So when you say the front is going to stabilize, and I'm like, okay, tell me how. Because you don't have enough SHORAD for the Russian ISR. You don't have enough long-range air defenses or aviation to stop the Russians from UMPKing to shit. And the most important part, you don't have even the tools to hit what is making life miserable for most of the tactical operational targets within the Ukrainian rear, which is the Iskander strike complex. And I'm not speaking about the cruise missile and stuff like that. I'm just telling you, you are not managing anything straight against Iskander. And that shit is 2 to 5 minutes to death, depending on where they're launching. So that's it. That's the whole point with the Russian consulting piece, is that the main takeaway is they stopped thinking about too far in the future. They limited their range of action within 2 to 4 months. The whole point that they're hoping is that the Russians run out of steam, that the front stabilizes. Right now, nobody's trying to have this idea that the Russians might choose a completely different path. As I said, now they're starting to push back in Kupiansk. They are also starting to push south of Siversk. What does it mean? Is it yet another diversion? Is it a sound strategy and so forth? These are not important. The problem is right now you got the Russians still attacking you in at least 10, 12, 15 non-interlinked connections. When they attack, for instance, on the whole Donetsk area, New York, Toretsk, beyond Arkhangelsk, Pokrovsk direction from Ocheretino. Then they're going for the Karlovka Reservoir. Then they're attacking towards Kurakovo. Then they're taking Krasnogorivka. Then they're still trying to push next to Ugledar on the main highway. You can see that the expanse of the front from the Russians is actually pretty huge. There is not one single shape of attack that is making the Ukrainians say, okay, we can push them back here. And this also means that these attacks are going to be small in scale anyway. You're not going to see divisions rolling from every single corner. They tried this hard enough, it didn't work, so now they are going for the exact same thing that Ukraine will be forced to do if they try to counter. If they are redoing it as they did in Zaporozhye, which is concentrating a lot of efforts in one axis, and they fail to choose the better suited axis, then it's going to end in tears, just like in 2023. Russians have completely avoided that, and now you got these small level attacks that are pushing every single day with losses, but are making the chains move. And for the Ukrainians, there's also no other solution. What are you going to do? You're going to already think about redoing a Kharkov? Where? So yeah, guys, that was for our friend Konrad Muzika. Thank you very much for this. I'm not sure I'm going to take any questions because there was nothing new to add, but it's actually up to you. Okay, if you guys don't want to add anything, it's not a problem. As I said, right now the situation is more or less stable at the front, so there is no major change in posture. And one of the things that we are hearing is that there is enough ammo, there is enough troops, or that the situation is being fixed. I'm going to repeat what I said. The Ukrainians, even with the incoming 50,000 and plus ammunition from multiple initiatives, just doesn't have enough ammo for the kind of fire missions they want to lead. And on top of it, the biggest problem we're going to repeat is the resource. The guns are scarce. They get taken out. I'm going to repeat what I said. If the Ukrainians lose 1 barrel per day, a total loss for a year, they will outstrip twice, if you add amortization, what the Europeans and Americans can produce per year. So right now, if you contract everyone that can make you a barrel, may that be the Slovaks, Czechs, French, the Brits are only now starting to restart the regeneration of their barrel making capabilities for the AS90 and also for the titanium barrels for 777s. Americans are also doing the same. But right now, the very few people that can make you a barrel, they are going to struggle to go beyond 200 SPGs a year. And we're speaking year production, we're not speaking contracts, because it's true that the Germans said that they're going to produce 22 barrels, but this is going to take them over a year to be able to do that. And it's logical, because making a barrel from scratch takes time anyway. But as I said, your problem is that if the Ukrainians lose 1 barrel per day, that will outstrip their capability to replace the losses. And I would like also everybody to watch the losses, the real losses in artillery, because for some reason Ukrainians lose these guns, but nobody seems to also put them into perspective, because although Conrad said that the SPGs and the guns need to be buried in order to have a chance against Lancet, but the reality is not the Lancet itself. It's also the type of artillery used, the rounds, ammunition, propellant, and how is it used. Basically, if your towed artillery is overtaken by enemy movement, like it happened recently in Soretino, it's going to be way too short, and then you're going to get hit by FPVs and stuff like that. Thank you very much. If you don't want to intervene, it's fine. No biggie. I would just like to add one last thing. Watch the Siverek salient soon. Between 2 or 3 weeks, we will know if the current push from the south towards Fedorivka and Ivan is real, or the Russians just did it to threaten the Siversk area in order to release pressure from the Serebryanka push by the third Azov. And also, apparently, Magyar is going back to Donetsk from Kharkov, which means that once again the choices that the Ukraine general staff is making is that it doesn't matter if Kharkov, stays how it is for now, 2 months plus. The point is not to lose the Donetsk line, and there you might understand exactly why this war, that people like it or not, once the Ukrainians are out or almost out of the Donetsk Oblast, and Lugansk and Donetsk are quote-unquote liberated, this war would have no sense politically, but militarily would be even worse, because then, and we've discussed this with Timur Criminal, then you run the risk of instead of having to deal with Kharkov Oblast alone getting salamied by the Russians, then the risk is actually the Russians pouring towards Dnipropetrovsk, and Dnipropetrovsk is a completely different matter, because if the Russians go fast enough and far enough, we're speaking within 8 to 10 months, once they reach the Donetsk Oblast border towards Dnipropetrovsk. Your problem is that you might very well lose access to both the Zaporozhye bridges and Dnipropetrovsk bridges if they're close enough to start lobbing UMPKs to Dnipro. This, once again, it has nothing to do with Russians taking over the city as it is, because it's a huge city, it's a 1 million city. And the closest the Russians have done so far was Mariupol, with roughly 500,000. But of course, they had a lot more means, and they had managed to completely trap 3 to 4 brigades in the area. So it's a completely different perspective. But the point for the Russians is not even to take Dnipro. The point for the Russians is, as I said, to reach the Samara marshes at the Samara River boundary. And then that allows them to have a natural barrier and, as I said, threaten the Kharkov Oblast far deeper than what they're able to do right now. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. Thank you for your patience, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.